Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind turning big ideas into real world impact. Let's get started.
Thank you for the introduction, Renos.
So, when we first hear that a new global survey's out, especially one that's comprehensive, you sort of hold your breath for that big headline number. And this one, the Global Findex 2025, seems on the surface pretty positive.
It really is. The top line finding is that 86% of adults around the world now own a mobile phone. 86%! That's a huge milestone for global connectivity.
It is, but I get the sense you're about to tell me it's not that simple. The devil is always in the details, isn't it?
Exactly. For researchers and policymakers, the real story isn't just about access anymore. It's about the quality of that access. It's about the kind of phone someone owns. The data is, well, it's incredibly clear on this.
Okay, so break that down for us. A phone is a phone, right?
Not when it comes to the digital economy. Think of a smartphone as the key gateway. It's the difference between having a dirt road and having a paved superhighway. The range of possibilities just explodes.
And the numbers back that up.
They do. In low and middle income economies, 92% of people who own a smartphone use the internet. That's that's almost everyone. But for those with just a basic phone, that number plummets to only 20%.
Wow. So the type of device creates this massive chasm in who can actually participate online in a meaningful way.
A massive chasm. And this is where we see those persistent development challenges like income and gender inequality they get magnified. So the very tool that could be an equalizer is actually amplifying existing inequalities in some cases.
So tell me more about that. How exactly are those gaps magnified?
Okay, so if we look at any type of mobile phone, the ownership gap between the poorest 40% of households and the wealthiest 60% is about 8 percentage points.
Which is a gap, but maybe not as wide as we might think.
Right. But when you look at smartphone ownership specifically, that gap becomes significantly wider, with poor adults 17 percentage points less likely than richer adults to own a smartphone. The gender gap follows a slightly different pattern. In low and middle income economies, the gender gaps for overall and smartphone ownership are both 9 percentage points. But interestingly, there is no significant gender gap in non smart or basic phone ownership, showing that differences in smartphone ownership are driving the overall gender gap in phone ownership.
And it doesn't just stop at ownership of the device itself, does it? The outline from the report points to what it calls secondary barriers.
Yes, and this is so important. Even when people own a device, there can still be barriers that prevent them from being able to fully benefit from the device. A great example is the SIM card. To use most digital financial services, you need a formal identity, and that often starts with a SIM card registered in your own name.
So it's not just about having the phone, but it's about having a recognized identity tied to that phone.
Exactly. It's a digital credential in a way, and without it, you're locked out of formal systems. The data shows nearly a quarter, 23% of mobile phone owners in low and middle income economies are using a SIM card registered to someone else. And there's a huge gender story there. In South Asia, the gap between men and women who have a SIM card in their own name is over 20 percentage points.
Which effectively blocks them from certain services before they even start.
That's right. And then there's literacy. A basic phone often relies on text based services. But what if you can't read the dominant alphabet used on the device? In South Asia, women are far less likely than men to be able to read texts using the Latin alphabet. It's a fundamental barrier.
So, with all these complex, layered issues, what's the core driver? What's the number one reason people are left out?
It's affordability, plain and simple. The data is overwhelming on this. When you ask people without a phone or with only a basic phone why they haven't upgraded, the primary barrier they cite is the cost of the device itself, and that really anchors the entire conversation. If people can't afford the entry ticket, the rest is secondary.
That's a sobering reality check. It brings us to the next major theme from the research, which is this gap between owning an account and actually using it in a meaningful way.
Right, because the story of Access has been, a huge success. Global account ownership is now at 79%, and mobile money has been a massive driver of that, especially in places like sub Saharan Africa, where 40% of adults now have a mobile money account.
Again, a fantastic headline number, but we're looking for the but.
The but is inactivity. High ownership rates can hide the fact that many of these accounts are dormant. The case of India is fascinating. They've reached about 90% account ownership, which is incredible, but 16% of those account owners have an inactive account, meaning no deposits, no withdrawals, no digital payments in the last year.
16%. And when you think about the scale of India's population, that represents an enormous number of people who have been brought into the system on paper but aren't yet participating. How does that compare globally?
It's 4 times higher. The average for other low and middle income economies is just 4%. It really suggests that policies focused on mass enrollment don't automatically lead to active, meaningful use. There's a behavioral piece we have to understand.
What do you mean by that? Is it about technology being too difficult or?
Not necessarily. In fact, when you ask account owners who don't use digital merchant payments why they stick to cash, the most common reason they give across all regions is simply habit. They're just used to paying with cash. It's not about infrastructure, it's about behavior. It points to the whole ecosystem needing to shift, not just the individual.
That's a powerful insight. And it seems to carry over into how people manage financial shock. The data on financial resilience is really telling.
It is because you'd think, okay, people have an account, so when an emergency hits, that's their first line of defense. But that's not what's happening. The number one source of emergency money is not a formal loan or a savings account, it's family or friends.
So people are still relying on these informal networks, even with an account in their pocket.
They are. 31% of adults turn to family and friends first. Savings are second at 21%. But here's the critical finding for researchers: those informal sources are the least reliable.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Nearly half of the people who say they would rely on family or friends also say that the money would be very difficult to get. Savings, on the other hand, are seen as the most reliable source. So there's this huge disconnect between the tool people have, the account where they can build reliable savings, and what they actually do in a crisis.
Which all seems to point to a deeper issue, a gap not just in access but in confidence and capability.
That's the foundation of it all. The data shows that two-thirds of adults who don't have a bank account say they would need help to use one. Two-thirds. That figure is just staggering. It's not just a small hurdle, it's a major barrier to adoption, and more importantly, to the kind of meaningful and confident use that truly improves financial lives.
It shows just how much work there is to do beyond simply opening the door to the financial system. You have to give people the confidence and the skills to walk through it.
Exactly. And that is where the next wave of research and policy really needs to focus.
Over to you, Renos.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.